China just cancelled $500 million worth of U.S. beef exports overnight. This isn't just about meat, it's about power, politics, and the complete reshaping of global food networks. What started as a trade dispute has become a geopolitical weapon that's destroying American farms and elevating Russia to unprecedented influence in global agriculture. The relationship between U.S. beef and China has been rocky since 2003, when mad cow disease led to widespread restrictions on American meat exports. It took nearly 2 decades for U.S. producers to rebuild trust and market access. Post-2020, American beef exports to China surged as the world's second-largest economy recovered from pandemic disruptions and demanded high-quality protein for its growing middle class. Then everything changed in a matter of days. China suddenly halted imports of over 150,000 tons of U.S. beef, citing vague food safety concerns. But industry insiders knew the real story. This wasn't about contamination or quality standards, it was direct retaliation for new U.S. tariffs imposed on Chinese electric vehicles. Beijing had weaponized food imports, turning America's agricultural strength into a pressure point. The numbers are staggering. Within weeks, $520 million in beef exports simply vanished. Contracts that had taken months to negotiate were cancelled overnight. American ranchers who had invested heavily in meeting Chinese certification requirements found themselves with massive inventories and no buyers willing to pay premium prices. Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska bore the brunt of China's agricultural offensive. These states, which had become heavily dependent on Chinese demand, saw their cattle markets collapse virtually overnight. Ranchers were forced to liquidate contracts at devastating losses, flooding the domestic market with beef that had been destined for premium export prices. The oversupply created a cascade of economic destruction. Domestic beef prices plummeted as the market struggled to absorb the sudden influx of high-grade meat. One Nebraska rancher captured the shock perfectly. "We were blindsided. We had contracts, certifications, everything in place, then nothing." But the damage extended far beyond individual farms. Feed suppliers who had expanded operations to support export-oriented ranches suddenly faced massive contract cancellations. Cold storage facilities that had invested millions in equipment to handle Chinese export requirements found themselves with excess capacity and mounting losses. Transportation companies that specialized in moving beef to Pacific ports laid off drivers and sold equipment. Rural communities that had experienced economic revival thanks to Chinese demand watched their gains evaporate. Equipment dealers, veterinarians, and countless other businesses that had prospered from the beef export boom began announcing layoffs. The ripple effect spread through entire regional economies, highlighting how deeply American agriculture had become integrated with Chinese markets. This wasn't random economic retaliation, it was surgical political warfare. China's leadership understands American electoral geography better than many Americans. The states hit hardest by the beef ban are critical political battlegrounds where agricultural voters can swing elections. Policy analysts immediately recognized the calculated nature of Beijing's response. By targeting specific agricultural products from specific regions, China was applying maximum political pressure while minimizing damage to its own economy. The message was clear: American trade policies would have consequences in the heartland states that often determine presidential elections. Agricultural pressure has become a preferred tool of geopolitical leverage. Unlike sanctions on technology or manufacturing, food restrictions create immediate, visible pain for ordinary voters. Farmers can't easily relocate or switch industries. When their markets disappear, the political backlash is swift and focused. The timing was particularly strategic, coming during a period of heightened U.S.-China tensions over technology, military issues, and trade. The beef ban sent a message that no American industry was safe from retaliation. China had effectively weaponized agriculture, turning food imports into a tool of statecraft. While American ranchers struggled with cancelled contracts, Russia moved with remarkable speed to fill the gap. Russian beef exports to China surged 300% in the first quarter of 2025, a growth rate that would have been impossible without extensive preparation. The foundation for this dramatic shift was laid in 2023, when China and Russia negotiated a comprehensive agreement streamlining meat certification processes. What previously took months of bureaucratic approval could now be completed in weeks. Russian producers gained fast-track access to Chinese markets just as American suppliers were being systematically excluded. Infrastructure played a crucial role in Russia's success. A new rail corridor connecting Russian cattle regions directly to Western China dramatically reduced transportation costs and delivery times. Russian beef could now reach Chinese consumers faster and cheaper than American alternatives that required ocean shipping. The financial architecture of this trade relationship represents a fundamental shift in global commerce. Russian-Chinese beef deals are settled in rubles and yuan, completely bypassing the US dollar. This isn't just about avoiding currency conversion costs, it's about building alternative financial systems that reduce dependence on Western banking networks. Russia's commitment to this opportunity is massive. The government announced a $1 billion investment program to double beef production capacity by 2027. This isn't short-term opportunism, it's a strategic play to become China's long-term protein supplier while American producers remain locked out. The beef ban was just the beginning. In March 2025, China imposed tariffs on over 700 U.S. agricultural products, creating a comprehensive assault on American farm exports. Pork, dairy, tea, almonds, and sorghum all became targets in what industry experts describe as the most systematic agricultural trade war in modern history. The scale of economic warfare is unprecedented. $21 billion worth of U.S. agricultural exports now face barriers, tariffs, or outright bans. The U.S. Department of Agriculture issued warnings about long-term exclusion from key markets, acknowledging that this isn't a temporary trade dispute but a fundamental realignment of global food networks. The collapse of Phase 1 trade deal commitments became painfully obvious as Chinese purchasing obligations expired without renewal. China had systematically reduced its dependence on American agricultural products while building alternative supply chains that excluded U.S. producers. This agricultural offensive reveals China's sophisticated understanding of American political vulnerabilities. By targeting products from specific congressional districts and states, Beijing can apply precise pressure on lawmakers while building support for its preferred policies among their constituents. China's strategy extends far beyond punishing American exporters. The world's second-largest economy is systematically restructuring global food supply chains around political alignment rather than economic efficiency. Argentina has emerged as a significant beef supplier despite economic instability and inflation concerns. Australia, despite trade friction over other issues, maintains agricultural access through careful diplomatic navigation. Brazil is rapidly expanding beef production to capture market share from displaced American suppliers. But Russia's rise represents something different, a strategic partnership that prioritizes political alignment over pure economic considerations. Russian beef may not always be cheaper or higher quality than American alternatives, but it comes with guarantees of political reliability that American products cannot provide. This shift from market efficiency to political alignment marks a fundamental change in how international trade operates. Price and quality, the traditional determinants of trade flows, are being supplemented by considerations of political trust and strategic reliability. China's approach to food security combines aggressive domestic expansion with strategic international partnerships. Domestic beef production increased 5% in 2024, with major investments in Inner Mongolia and Sichuan provinces. The government is pushing technological upgrades and scale improvements to reduce dependence on any single foreign supplier. Simultaneously, China is locking in long-term agreements with politically aligned suppliers. Contracts with Russia, Kazakhstan, and other partner nations include provisions for price stability, guaranteed volumes, and mutual support during international crises. These aren't just commercial agreements, they are strategic alliances designed to create resilient food networks. The core principles driving this strategy are reliability, political alignment, and currency independence. China wants suppliers who will maintain deliveries regardless of international political tensions, who share compatible foreign policy objectives, and who can conduct business without relying on Western financial systems. Long-term contracts with preferred suppliers include provisions that effectively lock out previous suppliers. American companies that once enjoyed access to Chinese markets now face structural barriers that go far beyond simple tariffs or quotas. The infrastructure supporting China's new food strategy represents a complete departure from traditional international trade networks. Rail corridors connecting Russia to Western China bypass traditional maritime routes that could be disrupted by naval conflicts or sanctions. Belt and Road Initiative investments have created transportation networks that prioritize political allies over economic efficiency. These aren't just infrastructure projects, they are strategic assets that give China and its partners alternatives to Western-dominated shipping and logistics systems. Payment systems operating in local currencies reduce dependence on the U.S. dollar and Western banking networks. Russian-Chinese agricultural trade now operates through systems that are immune to Western sanctions and monetary policy decisions. Plant certifications and regulatory approvals now favor politically aligned partners. What once were technical processes governed by scientific standards have become tools of political preference, making re-entry into Chinese markets structurally difficult for American exporters. American agriculture's dependence on Asian demand has created vulnerabilities that extend far beyond immediate economic losses. The assumption that market forces would always favor the most efficient producers has been shattered by the reality of politicized trade. Global trade is shifting toward diplomacy and political alignment rather than pure economic competition. Countries are choosing suppliers based on strategic considerations that include political reliability, currency preferences, and long-term geopolitical alignment. Failure to adapt to this new reality means permanent loss of market share. American agricultural exporters who continue to operate under traditional commercial assumptions will find themselves systematically excluded from markets that prioritize political considerations over economic efficiency. Reactive policy responses focused on tariffs and short-term retaliation are inadequate for addressing this fundamental shift. The challenge requires comprehensive strategic realignment that acknowledges the new role of politics in international trade. The U.S. must move beyond tariffs and short-term retaliation toward comprehensive strategic engagement. This means recognizing that trade policy cannot be separated from broader foreign policy objectives and that agricultural exports are now tools of geopolitical competition. Market diversification is essential. American agricultural exporters must develop strong relationships with Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America to reduce dependence on any single large market. This requires investment in infrastructure, certification processes, and long-term partnership development. Modernizing trade systems to embrace multi-currency transactions and alternative payment networks is crucial for maintaining competitiveness. American reluctance to engage with non-dollar financial systems puts exporters at a disadvantage in markets where political alignment matters more than traditional commercial considerations. Investment in global competitiveness must extend beyond production efficiency to include diplomatic engagement and strategic partnership development. Agricultural exports now require the same level of government support and strategic planning traditionally reserved for defense and technology sectors. The fundamental challenge is that trade used to be about profit, but now it's about power and who you trust. American agricultural policy must evolve to compete in this new reality where food security is national security and supplier relationships are strategic alliances. The beef trade collapse is not just an economic setback, it's a warning that the rules of international commerce have fundamentally changed.